How are you guys? How was your weekend? I'm just typing my little pinned comment. Great to see you guys. Hi, Kate. Nice to see you again. Wonderful to see familiar names here. Tell me how your weekend was. Tell me where you went for the weekend. Did you catch up with any friends? Hi, Hayley. Did you actually make the most of some easing restrictions wherever you might be and sit in a cafe if your state allowed it or your country allowed it? I'd love to hear what you got up to and how you're feeling about this whole restriction things coming a little bit looser. Come with Kumi Check-in Monday. What else do I write? I'm just going to quickly pin this comment. So if you need to grab a cuppa, grab a cookie, grab a blanket to keep you warm, do that now and then we'll get started. Hi Shane, nice to see you. Keep in touch. I'm just going to quickly write this. It's actually a beautiful day here in Sydney, chilly, but the sun is just starting to set through this wonderful red leaves I have in the front garden here. It's a pear tree and the leaves turn bright red just for a couple of weeks in autumn and it's just stunning and the light hits it just at the right time of day. So it's very, very pretty. abc.net.au. I'm nearly there, guys. Post. Okay, pin comment. Hayley saying, visited my family for the first time. That's awesome, Hayley. It was marvellous. We had fun singing karaoke spread out in the lounge room with wooden spoons. What's the wooden spoon thing? Maybe who gets the winning song? That's awesome, Hayley. Hugh sat in the cafe for the first time in weeks in Brisbane. Jody says his son came over for dinner last night. That's so cool. Scott worked all weekend. Lots of people from out of town ending up coming into hospital. I'm not sure what to make it of all, to be honest. That's interesting. Sounds like you're in the Blue Mountains there, Scott. That's a little troubling. Great to see you here. Today is Check-in Monday. As you know, Cuppa with Kumi. I have my favourite cup here today. This one that actually has a little teapot that sits on the top. I love it so much. It gives me about 3 cups of tea. I've got peppermint. This is the day where I check in with my bestie, Sarah. Hayley's saying that pretend microphone so we didn't spread germs. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, Hayley. This is about the karaoke she had with her family. Sarah's about to join me. This is the day that I kind of chat with her and we chat about what's on particularly my mind. And then we're going to chat with Dr. Matthew Beard from the Ethics Centre because today I really wanted to talk about this kind of easing of restrictions and this sort of renegotiating of relationships in a way. I don't know if you've had those conversations with friends where you've called them up and said, hey, wouldn't mind catching up for a coffee. How do you feel about that? And I think everyone's in a very different space. So I thought that's what we'll chat about. Before we get going, though, a few of you are asking about Jared. Jared is there, hiding behind my head. He's feeling a little shy today, but he wanted to listen in, still be part of it, but he didn't really feel like, being overly visible today. We all have days like that, hey? One bit of time open at the end of our chat for you to ask us questions. I think I'll do the same today. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
You're looking very summery today.
It's quite warm. I have been painting all day and I was in the sun at the beach yesterday. The kids were swimming still yesterday.
You're joking.
No, it was so beautiful.
Oh, so nice to see you. What are you drinking?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me. You're going to laugh though.
Okay, hang on. It's some herbal concoction with goat's milk.
No, close. It's dandy chai with a 1/4 teaspoon of reishi mushroom and cacao, about half a teaspoon of manuka honey and some almond milk.
Oh, I was close.
I'll make one.
So I'm still on this whole coming out of lockdown thing, right? And one of the things I've noticed is, you came round for dinner, right? I think it was Wednesday night last week. You brought your takeaway after work. We kind of kept that social distance thing, but you were the first person who came into my house for months. And it's that kind of, and if we spoke about it beforehand, like, how do you feel about it? Do you feel comfortable about it? And I've been having these negotiations with friends for the last week or so, and everyone sits in such a different place and space about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Look, I feel pretty fine about it, but like I've said before, my life hasn't changed that much. I'm still working part-time. It's just a bit busier at home. So I feel fine about it. And you know what I'm like, I'm a bit of an optimist anyway. But I've kind of talked to my mum and my auntie, and I haven't had so many conversations with friends. I've seen kind of a few friends, like my neighbour I kind of catch up with over the fence for a wine sometimes, and so I haven't felt as probably restricted as other people, but I ran into a lady in the fruit shop about 7:30 a.m. dropping one of my kids off at school last week, and she would have been in her 60s, and she had her mask on, and she said, "This is the first time I've been out in 8 weeks."
Wow.
And the guy who owned the fruit shop said, "Wow, you know, so are you feeling more confident?" And she said, "Well, I am at this time in the morning." So, you know, she's in a very different place to where I am. And I think about like talking about it and just really respecting where everyone's at, you know. It's no set rules, and I think that some people are more fearful than others. And I think that being really gentle with those people are really important.
And it's sort of like that, we've got these rules set out by our government or whoever's deciding where we should sit and everything. But then I think everyone's interpretation about kind of what that might mean, there's sort of a grey area as well. So even the cafe up the road, the first day that you're allowed to sit there, it was just empty because I think everyone was still coming to terms with the fact you could sit outside. And it was strange because you sort of knew that you could. I knew I could, but I still got my takeaway. I just wasn't quite there yet to sit down and occupy that space.
I know it's been so weird for you, like for you, especially because such a big part of your life is like looking for those little things that you haven't seen before and the cafes that you haven't dropped in. And I know it's been really weird for you. So what are you like most worried about?
Gosh, that's a great question. I haven't thought about that. Worried about, I don't know. I'm actually more worried that I won't find that confidence again to live life normally, whatever that means. So I found that I went to the usual cafe I normally went to. This was the next day, and sat there, but just for about 10 minutes because I didn't sort of feel comfortable in that open space again. It's strange. So when I project forward what I used to do, like walking through town and getting the bus in and going to a new little cafe, I can't imagine that still, because I think for me, part of participating in society is the bustle of lots of people around, the kind of bustle of activity, and so it feels strange. So I don't know if that's a worry as much as I'm not sort of, I don't feel comfortable even though things have opened up. I don't feel as comfortable as I would have before because the atmosphere is so different.
Did you find last weekend the atmosphere changed? Like I found had really shifted, but you know, like I'm in Terrigal and it's not quite in nation, and was just you know, people were sitting in cafes and there was a lot more energy and more shops were open and heaps of people at the beach, all social distancing and stuff, but just heaps of people kind of out and with a really good, nice feel about it.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. I didn't sort of venture out too far because I didn't feel as comfortable as doing it as I thought I would. I thought I'd be like, whoa, I can go and I can catch up with all these friends and I can do all this stuff. But I sort of thought, oh no, I actually feel safe in my little bunker right now and I'll just still stick to my hood. So it didn't change. The atmosphere wasn't that different where I am, which is quite interesting. I'm talking with Sarah on Check-in Monday just about this whole how we negotiate our friendships and relationships and stuff out of lockdown. Kate's saying here, Sarah, I'm cautious as I have a 90-year-old mum here. So yeah, I suppose it totally depends on who's living with you and your responsibility to everyone else in the household. Mel's loving your painting in the background, by the way. And a lot of people saying hello. Sam saying still quite happy to grab my cafe stuff and enjoy it by myself in a park with space. Rosie, going back to using and feeling comfortable on public transport is going to be challenging.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, that is interesting. It's kind of nearly like we're feeling more comfortable in that locked down state, which is what we talked about last week, I think, like easing out of it slowly.
And also I think like working out what you've really, or what you've gotten used to or enjoyed about being a bit locked down and bunkered down, and then taking that into your new life instead of just jumping back into your old life.
Yeah, right. So what would be an example of that? Like reading more books or something, or more time to think without having stuff in your schedule all the time?
Yeah, like because again my life hasn't changed, but I think it's so much more than 30, and we do a meditation together just as we're going to sleep, and that's something I kind of went, I want to make the most of this opportunity, because I feel like it's a big shift in energy, and what do I want to bring into that new life?
Yes.
But I had a client say that, you know, her little routine now is that she wants to keep is like at a certain time in the morning, the light comes in the front room, so she gets a coffee, reads 10 minutes of her meditation book, and then opens her computer.
Right.
Because she's not traveling.
Yeah, okay, so she's carrying that forwards into her post-COVID life.
Yeah.
It's so interesting here. There's so many people here saying still having takeaway coffee outside on the park bench while they're sitting inside in a cafe with coffee.
I'm enjoying that too.
Yeah, and maybe it's not so much avoiding sitting in a cafe. It's more like, oh, I didn't realize how much I enjoyed being outside and looking at a view and enjoying that solitude. Jody saying here, my lovely Nepali neighbours had me over for dinner Saturday night and lunch yesterday, and it was awesome to socialise again. So totally also depends on your personality type, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you bring in, Kum? What have you enjoyed about it?
I've probably enjoyed having a simpler life and not filling my days with lots of stuff. That makes sense. Kind of very structured routine, which I like, but there's space in there for just my brain to be a little bit more idle, or not rushing through things like dinner, like actually going, oh, I might start dinner at 5 today and make a nice meal, instead of kind of rushing back on the bus and quickly getting dinner done and that being a chore. So I suppose for me, it's kind of enjoying tasks, domestic tasks that normally would have been bashed, 2 hours at least taken away from my day, not commuting anymore. So I've enjoyed that actually, and it's made me not resent domestic chores as much as enjoy them as a space.
Nice.
So yeah, I could take that, I suppose. I'll quickly go through a few more comments. At Bondi Beach, it does not feel much different. You can actually forget about social distancing. No one seems to follow the rules. Bondi's been a bit of an issue this whole time.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I think there's this thing of like, oh, beach, sunny day, let's go to the beach, and it doesn't seem to apply. That's been a really challenging one. I think not only in Australia, but other countries as well. But insanely busy. It was like Easter. It's like a double-edged sword. Yeah, so everyone's wanting to rush out. Yeah, everyone to be part of society again. It's like, there's too many people around. I think that's going to be really interesting, especially coming into school holidays in July.
Yeah.
How we moderate that. What's your week looking like, my Sarah?
Well, I've just done some painting, and Wynn's going to finish some flooring, and I've thought about my birthday, which is coming up, so which you know about. So that's quite exciting as things are opening up. I'm like, oh, I actually really want to see my girlfriend. So I'm organising something for that, which will be really lovely.
Which, of course, will live video stream the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. That's just in a few weeks. I can't wait, actually.
Cool, me too.
So nice to see you as always, my Sarah. I'll see you next Monday, but drop in for dinner this week if you can.
Oh, yeah, I might do that. And I'll make you one of my specialties when you come up, okay?
Thank you.
You will like it.
Bye. That's Sarah there joining me with whatever herbal interesting concoction she always makes. She knows that I'll find it hilarious and funny. Hey, we didn't get any coffee cup pictures from you guys over the weekend, so I've randomly pulled up 2 pictures that I like just to show you because I like showing pictures. So send us some pictures, Cuppa with Kumi at abc.net.au. And in fact, on Wednesday, we are going to be talking about pets and how they make us feel better. And I want pictures of your pets, so send them through to us, Cuppa with Kumi at abc.net.au. This is the tree I was talking about that's outside in the front garden. It's actually not a great photo, but this is the red leaves. It's just so beautiful, and I just love it. And speaking of pets, you would know Miles. That's him eating a raspberry. It takes him about 2 minutes to eat a whole raspberry, but it's very cute. And there you go. So please send us photos. We love to show them. Today on Check-in Monday on Cuppa with Kumi, we're kind of talking about these boundaries and renegotiation of friendships and relationships as we come out of lockdown. Have you had some conversations with friends about their comfort levels? How have you brought those conversations up? Have you had friends who feel differently about what they want to do? You might want to sit in the park and have a picnic. They might feel more comfortable just having a cup of tea on their own with you at home. I'd be really interested to sort of hear how you're negotiating this space. I'm finding that I'm having to have quite extensive conversations with every separate friend just to find out where they're at, and it's just something I've never had to do in my life before. And I thought a lot of this kind of pins down to ethics and boundaries and how we operate and feel in the world. So I wanted to bring in Dr. Matthew Beard. I've spoken to him a number of times over the years as a journalist, and I just love his take on everything. He's a moral philosopher from the Ethics Centre. Hey, Matt, how are you going?
Good, Kumi. How are you?
Oh, great. I love your jacket, by the way. That's like so
Thank
cool.
you. So warm. It was like an op shop pickup, but it's so warm because it is a bit chilly here in Sydney today.
It is a bit chilly. It's kind of like the sun pops out and then it goes away, and it's like, no, I'm not staying around anymore.
Yeah, we're just trying to wait for the sun, rush the kids outside, bring them inside as the drizzle comes. It's kind of a back and forth day.
Woohoo! How have you been going in this time?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a juggle in that so my partner is a psychologist, and so she's actually had the opportunity to pick up more work because it's all done remotely and because there's a lot of need. So we've been juggling kind of workloads and work times kind of with the kids in the house all the time. So we've got a almost 4-year-old and a just turned 1-year-old.
Wow.
So it's meant that there's kind of a couple of days that I'm working and then a lot of work done through the evenings. So we're a little bit sleep deprived, and it's been nice to see things start to open up a little bit just so that we can, take the kids to go and see family and have family come here. We had our daughter's first birthday during isolation, so we're kind of catching up on a few things like that, which is kind of.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm glad to hear you're going well. I was sort of thinking it must be a really interesting time for you because I feel like so much of what we've been dealing with have been moral or ethical kind of conundrums. I was thinking way back in the beginning when there was the toilet paper hoarding and kind of going, wow, what's going on with that? And have you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways it's been both edifying and unedifying in that it's confirmed a lot of views I have around some of the ways in which we've kind of gone astray and things that we as a community and as a society need to work on. But it's also disappointing to realize that there are so many things that we need to work on. So in some ways, I think that some of the things that we have been confronted with and needed to do here are the opposite of the ways in which our ordinary lives are structured and set up to be able to do those kinds of things. So we think about the way we needed to respond in the early phases in the supermarkets, right? Where we actually had to think not just about me as a consumer and my needs and my wants as an individual, but we needed to think as a community and collectively, how much of this can I take and still leave enough for everyone else? And we saw that we weren't especially equipped to do that. And that wasn't our default setting. And so that's quite revealing and quite interesting in different ways. We saw that there was a challenge around people in the early stages of the lockdown being able to conceptualize that actually we have these really powerful influences and obligations on people we will never meet, people we will never see. And yet actions can touch their lives in these profound ways. I've been thinking a lot about one of my favorite quotes is from a feminist philosopher named Carol Gilligan. And she says, we live on a trampoline. Every time we move, it affects everybody else. And I think that's what we've been getting a sense of, is this way in which this myth that we tell ourselves as that we're all these atomized individuals who can kind of are disconnected from each other and can choose the terms on which we relate to each other is really just a myth. It's not true at all. And we are radically kind of interdependent and connected in these ways that need to inform the ways that we build society and make our choices.
I'm chatting with Dr. Matthew Beard, who's joined us for a cuppa. I don't know if you have a cuppa or a virtual cuppa. We're talking about the kind of, I'm really interested in this grey area, Matt, you know, these sort of boundaries that we've set, these sort of moral and ethical conundrums that we're coming across, and particularly as we're coming out of lockdown, you know, negotiating these relationships, what other people feel comfortable with, whether we want to sit in the cafe or not. And so if you've got any questions for Matt, please throw them up, anything that you've found challenging. And Matt's fantastic on that moral philosophy angle. So, I mean, Matt, the thing that I always come down to is this right versus wrong. You know, we seem to work in this kind of polarized, this is right, this is wrong. But I feel like our boundaries and rules and everything have been shifting so much throughout this process that right one week is not right the next week, or wrong one week is less wrong the following day. Or so we've kind of we haven't really dealt with sort of certainty, and so we're kind of having to negotiate around these grey areas a lot. And do we have the kind of capacity to do that? What's our default when we're kind of given those conundrums?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one thing to say is that I think that what's right and what's war, and obviously the things that are right and wrong in wartime are very different to what's right and wrong in ordinary life. There are things that you can do in one context that you can't do in another context. What we've struggled with is that the context has changed so quickly and so rapidly. And when you pair that with a huge amount of misinformation being spread online, with competing political agendas, it has been very difficult to feel certain and feel confident around what's to be done. And what we tend to see and do is that when there is an absence of information, when we are uncertain and we have to make decisions under uncertainty, we look for an anchor, like something to hold on to that we can feel really confident in. And usually that anchor is something that's outside of us, you know, something that someone to tell us what to do. So I've heard a lot of people saying, as they start to roll back restrictions, I just wish they kept everything locked down. It was so much easier when everything was locked down. Yeah. Of course, it's true for some people in terms of the difficulty in making decisions and having awkward conversations. It's not true for all of the people who are desperately reliant on getting back to work and needing that kind of these lockdowns to end as soon as possible for them and their family's well-being. And I think the lockdown was important. I think it was necessary. I'm not critical of it, but we do need to minimize any potential harms that come from that. And what we now need to do is an act of solidarity. We all locked down in solidarity for the people who are most at risk. Now what we need to do for the people who are at risk of the economic effects, of the mental health effects, of all those kinds of things, is we need to be okay with a little bit of uncertainty. We need to be okay with the prospect of having some difficult conversations or having to set our own comfort level around these kinds of things and then assert that. That's going to be disruptive and uncomfortable to our lives in a different way. But I think that's now where our moral obligation kind of sits, is in actually navigating those kinds of things.
That's fascinating because I have heard a similar thing of people saying it was easier in full lockdown, but you're right, the economic effects on a whole bunch of other people is huge. So it's kind of like, how do we find that? Does that have to come from kind of language and from leadership, or, you know, how is there going to be a unified solidarity about this next phase? Where does that message have to come from?
I think that I don't want to reward that instinct too much, because we're still looking outside for someone else to set that kind of guidance. And this seems really new, but actually this is a really normal kind of human instinct that we have. So if you look at kind of existential philosophers are big on this, that, you know, that the thing that we have to confront most of all is our own freedom and our own responsibility for our own lives. And that's a really scary thing to come into contact with. You know, the fact called bad faith, where we pretend that we don't have that responsibility, or we try to hand that responsibility off to somebody else. And we want them to make those decisions for us. I think there are going to be people who are going to set different boundaries and different limits based on what level of risk they're comfortable with, based on their personal circumstances and how proximal they are to Indigenous communities or people who are immunocompromised, or if they have elderly family members who they would like to go and visit. We are all going to have different boundaries around these things. And what we're not accustomed to doing is asserting those when it seems uncomfortable. There will be people who are coming into the home and wanting to give you a big hug, and you might not be comfortable with that. And really, according to social distancing guidelines, you shouldn't be doing that. But actually, when someone who you love is coming in to give you an embrace, to be able to push back on that and say, no, like, we mustn't do that, puts us in a difficult position. We don't know how that's going to be received. We don't know how that's going to be positioned. And so our instinct is actually to defer and to play along and to keep the peace. Now, preserving relationships is good, is important, but not at the expense of what we think is actually important, and not if we think that's going to generate some kind of risk or harm to somebody else. So I think the one thing we need to do is as a group just go, we're going to need to be okay being told, hey, my boundaries are different than yours, and create like a general permission for people to actually accept that.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating. And I think it's that permission and everyone being on board with that and accepting what the consequences of that might be. Matt, if you've got time, do you mind if we go to a few questions? There's quite a few coming through for you. John wants to know whether you think this pandemic can be a good opportunity to encourage more moral.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to be really slow to talk about some of the potential upsides of the lockdown, because I'm just looking internationally at a death toll that's over 300,000 people. And I think we need to be sobered by that, and we need to confront that reality and look at the fact that a lot of that was avoidable, was the product of the way in which healthcare systems were structured. It was the product of, entrenched disadvantage. I think before I want to focus on the potential upsides, I want to focus on the harms that need to be remediated in order to stop this from happening again. That said, one of those harms is climate change. It is environmental. That is not only kind of equivalent in terms of the level of risk and threat, if not larger, but actually there's a lot of evidence to suggest that the risk of pandemics is going to grow in the face of growing impact of climate change. So we have a number of reasons to want to address those kinds of things. But I think we want to find solutions to those problems that are lasting and are the product of concerted human effort, and not the product of the kind of the luck of some pandemic that had a cherry on top of a whole heap of horror. I want to know that, we've addressed in a really significant way the underlying issues that generated climate change, which are overconsumption, which are a growth-based model of economy, and a range of other things. Like, otherwise, I wonder if we're just postponing those issues for another time rather than really confronting them.
That's a very interesting. I've just been sitting here thinking, well, with your partner being a psychologist and you having this philosopher brain, your conversations must be so interesting at home. I'm going to combine a couple of questions that have come through just into one. Matt, earlier, one of our viewers sort of said, not so much about coming out of lockdown, but how do you manage sort of elderly relatives who take a kind of laissez-faire approach to coronavirus, and I'll kind of weave into that a question here, or sort of a statement here from Heidi saying that kind of stuff. There does seem to have been a different sort of interpretation amongst some elderly people about the virus, and I suppose it's like, how do you kind of negotiate that when you're dealing with a generation who might be going, look, I've only got a few more years to live anyway, I want to get as many hugs as I can out of my grandkids, and there's so many different aspects at different phases of life that have to be considered.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm reluctant to suggest in any way that that a personal decision around how comfortable someone is with receiving hugs to their grandkids is something that I want to moralize or pass the judgment over. I think that really is a private choice for that person to make. But what we need to bear in mind as well is, like I said before, these are not individual decisions where it's like, I want to make my decision to live in this way. That individual decisions have collective implications. And I think we do need to think about it in that context, right? So it's to say, the grandkids are coming into my home, and so I'm going to give them a whole heap of hugs. And, I'm not an epidemiologist, but there seems to be a lower level of risk associated with kids by comparison to other things. But I know all of this is super contested. But then if that grandparent is then going to catch up with other friends, and those friends happen to be huggers, and they don't like to say, no, I don't want to hug you, that's where we start to have these individual decisions that have a range of indirect knock-on effects. So I think it's one thing to say, I'm making a choice around the risk factors that are associated with my life and my values. Fine. I can appreciate that. We can talk about whether your values are appropriately aligned. We can have that conversation. But as soon as your behaviors around that individual choice have knock-on effects, or you're refusing to rearrange your life so that you're actually inoculating or protecting people from those other kinds of images, from those other kinds of practices that you're making choices around, those other things that I'm allowed to do. So I'm not going to do social distancing in the home, but I'm still going to enjoy all of the benefits of things opening up. Well, that might be potentially risky behavior. And I think if we're in for a penny, we're in for a pound with these kinds of things. And it's so easy to rationalize choices based on what we want to do in a particular moment and lose that sense of consistency and coherency. But I think that's going to be a really important thing coming through this is set your risk threshold where you want to set your risk threshold, but don't set it for someone else, either deliberately or unintentionally.
That's really great advice, Matt. It is always so great to chat with you, and I'm so happy that you got to come on the program and share some time with us. Thank you so much, and enjoy taking the kids to the park and enjoy that extra space you have, and stay safe, and hopefully catch up with you again soon.
Same to you, Kumi. Thanks so much for your questions, everyone.
Thanks so much, Matt. Thank you. And that was Dr. Matthew Beard, such a great moral philosopher from the Ethics Centre. I think Eric summed it up here brilliantly. To hug or not to hug, that is the question. Love it, Eric. That's fantastic. That gets us to the end of Monday already. Thank you so much to Sarah, as always, and to Dr. Matthew Beard for taking the time to chat with us. I feel like I learned so much. Sarah, of course, will be back next Monday. Please keep in contact with us, Cuppa with Kumi at abc.net.au. Pets on Wednesday, so send us photos of your pets, especially if they're pets that make you feel better, why, how, all those kinds of things. Just inhaled some strange air. Excuse me. So tomorrow is Topical Tuesday. That's the day where we dig into a few things a little bit deeper, and I want to stick with this pandemic thing. Excuse me, I'm just going to sip more of my tea before I choke. We're going to talk about, when does a pandemic end? Does it ever end? What makes it end? And there's so many interesting articles and conversations happening around this at the moment. So tomorrow, to help us dissect that, I'm going to be joined by Damien Carrick. He's the presenter of The Law Report, a fantastic program and podcast on the ABC. He's going to talk about the sort of rules and regulations and how policing helps and hinders, but helps kind of us navigate this new world. And then Dr. Norman Swan will join us second tomorrow and talk about the kind of pandemic ending and what happens when it ends. Does it ever end? What does the science say? And what does social kind of the society say? So there's two different things. So that's pretty exciting. I'm so excited to have Dr. Norman Swan on. So many of you would have seen his fantastic work. I'm sure many of you are listening to his daily podcast called Corona Cast. So we'll have a great show tomorrow on Topical Tuesday. One question here about pets. Does a pet rock count? Absolutely, Sam. I have a pet rock on my shelf, so I'll be sure to show that to you. It's got a very nice story behind it as well. Pet rock totally counts. So looking forward to our conversation tomorrow, and I hope you've had a great start to the week. And thank you, as always, for joining me and for joining in the conversation. And I'll see you at the same time tomorrow.